All right, welcome guys. I'm going to give my sort of hot take on Halo Infinite. I recently just finished it, and yeah, I want to give my thoughts on it. Um, I'm going to break it down into sort of three parts. The first thing I want to talk about is the gameplay. Then I'll talk a little bit about the graphics, and then finish off by talking about my thoughts on the story. So in terms of gameplay, I would say that Halo Infinite is pretty good. I don't know that it's quite at the level of the original Halo or Halo 2, but in comparison to some of the other installments, I would say it's probably better. I found it a bit more enjoyable than maybe Halo 3. Um, and Halo Reach, and definitely more enjoyable than Halo 4. God, I hate Halo 4. And yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about it's sort of all how all of that works in a second. But I wanted to jump right in and talk about the sort of new thing with Halo Infinite, and that's equipment, and most specifically the grapple shot. So I think the grapple shot is a great addition to Halo Infinite. It's a lot of fun. It's not a particularly original idea because clearly Doom has done it first. Um, but originality isn't isn't a requirement for fun. The grapple shot is fun in Doom, and it's fun in Halo. I love that the grapple shot gives you a lot more ways to move around. It gives you a whole lot of mobility. It allows you to use it strategically too, because you can use it to grab weapons and items. You can use it on enemies too, I guess, though mostly the best use of it is to sort of use it to knock away the Jackal's shield. But yeah, overall, I would say that the grapple shot is a lot of fun. It kind of makes it feel not quite like Halo because I feel like in the past Halo games, for you to get to certain places in the map, it took some creativity. Rocket jumping, grenade jumping, and all that. Those were sort of a staple of the older Halo games, and I feel like with the grapple shot, it kind of does away with some of that. So it doesn't quite feel like a Halo game, but at the end of the day, it's still a lot of fun. Now, as for the other equipment, I really like the threat detector. If you watch my Let's Play videos, you'll see that I use it a ton. I especially like to just kind of shoot it into a room, get a lay of the land, right as I walk in. So I quite like the threat detector. As for the other abilities, I think they've existed in. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say I think. I know that they've existed in other Halo installments. So one of them is a drop shield, and the other is the thruster. In any case, those aren't like new abilities in the Halo universe, but I thought that they were still okay. The drop shield definitely saved my bacon on more than a few occasions. I would say the least useful is probably the thruster. I found that having to select it in order to use it meant that there's too much input lag, so to speak. Like when you need it, you have to like press too many buttons to get to it, and then to use it. And by then, um, the whatever you're trying to escape from is probably already it's probably already killed you. So yeah, I don't really love the thruster, and you know the chances are you probably have the grapple shot selected most of the time, and so yeah, you will have to switch to the thruster almost invariably. And yeah, so I didn't really like it. Now, more importantly, with all this new equipment, you know, what are the enemies bringing to the table that's new, right? Because if all the enemies are exactly the same as before and you get all these new tools, well, it can result in one or two things. One, it could just feel like you're OP, right? You have way more ways to fight the banished, while they have little to use against you, right? The other possibility that can happen is that you have all these new toys, but you haven't needed all these all these toys in the past to defeat this enemy, and so you could just as well not use all this new equipment, right? Well, I'm happy to say that the enemies in Halo Infinite are well designed, and they definitely do make you use the equipment. For example, in terms of the grapple shot, I found that with Halo Infinite, they tend to throw a ton of enemies at you. Just so many enemies at you. So there are many ways that the Banish can snipe you. What with the Stalker rifle, the shock rifle, and also the skewer, right? So with all of these weapons hitting you long range, and with so many enemies, period, you really need to get to cover really quickly, and so the grapple shot helps. In terms of the drop shield, I'd say that it's a welcome addition for mostly the same reasons. You have so many enemies in Halo Infinite, and they're all hitting at you from so far away because there's so many open environments that it gives you some room to breathe, right? Because sometimes just popping out of cover to quickly take a look, that'll result in you dying because there's so many snipers. And so having a drop shield gives you a bit more breathing room. And the ability to shoot out from behind the shield while also preventing projectiles from hitting you, that's key, in surviving against those kind of odds. I would say probably the best example of how enemies have adapted to the sort of new slate of equipment is with invisibility and the threat detector. Because it used to be that in Halo, when an enemy was invisible, you could still see it somewhat, right? And what's more, when you shoot it and you hit it, they become visible. And so it wasn't too hard to fight invisible enemies. Well, in Halo Infinite, invisible enemies are like very hard to see. they're I would say damn near impossible unless they move, and there is a bit of a shimmer that you see, but like it's so indistinct that like you can't really tell like what's what. You can't tell where the head is, you can't tell where the body is, so you're just like spraying in that general direction. And what's more, hitting invisible enemies in Halo Infinite doesn't make them become visible. And so so you need the threat detector to counter these invisible enemies. So that's great. So that's probably the best example of how Halo Infinite forces you to use equipment. And I've already said the thruster. I don't really know. I hardly ever use the thruster during the game. Now, as for weapons, we've kind of talked a little bit about it. I, for the most part, like the variety of weapons on display in Halo Infinite. I absolutely love the skewer. It's fun because it's not just because it's like a one-shot kill weapon, but it's fun because it's a projectile weapon. It's not a hit scan weapon, and so you kind of have to lead shots a little bit. It also has bullet drop, and so it feels like it takes a little bit of skill to use. So I love the skewer, and I use that a ton during the game. And I like the Ravager. It's kind of like a mortar style weapon. But by the way, I'll also mention that the Ravager is another way I think that the Banished is able to keep the playing field a bit level with the Master Chief and all this new equipment. Because, with the Master Chief being able to get to cover so easily, and with the grapple shot, and with him being able to deploy a drop shield to give himself cover, the enemy needs ways to counter that, right? And I think the Ravager or a mortar style weapon is the perfect counter, because you can basically fire an arcing shot that goes over your cover. So that's great. There are definitely some duds in the weapon selection here. I for one did not like the disruptor. I know it's like an anti-vehicle weapon, but like I'm not going to carry that around just for the odd time that I need to disable a weapon, right? Because most of the time you're running around, you're like shooting enemies, and then and so you're carrying around other weapons for that. And when are you gonna have a disruptor in your back pocket, right? In all these sort of open areas, I rarely find that I have a disruptor to pick up to counter a vehicle. I'd much rather just destroy the vehicle using some big weapon, whether that's my own vehicle's weapons or a rocket launcher or something, right? The Cinder Shot is, to me, like the equivalent of the Brute Shot. I feel like the Needler seems a bit weaker in this iteration. The tracking doesn't seem to be as good. And the Pulse Carbine, nothing seems to capture the magic of the original Halo 1 plasma rifle. Yeah, that's mostly it, I guess, I wanted to say about the weapons. And then finally, let's talk about the open world aspect of the gameplay. So I don't think Halo Infinite benefits from being an open world game. Number one, it's not that open world, to be honest. Like the world that you're allowed to explore is very small compared to most other open world games that you know, like The Witcher, I don't know, Skyrim, Cyberpunk, all these Red Dead Redemption, all these open world games tend to be much, much bigger. Halo Infinite's world is not that big. And it's also mostly just forests and hills. And so it's also very uninteresting, right? What I like about the open world in The Witcher 3 in particular is that you can explore the world and you'll come across interesting stories, right? But here, not really. At most you're going to come across a base with enemies and that you have to clear, and that's it. So I don't think Halo Infinite benefits from the open world design. And what's more, I don't really understand the draw of having an open world, because I love the original Halo because it felt like you were seeing all kinds of different vistas. You were like globe trotting, right? In Halo 1, there were, tight corridors, whether it's on a ship or in a Forerunner structure. There were boreal forests, kind of like in Halo Infinite. And there were like snowy landscapes too. There was, I think, a kind of a jungle-ish type of area too. There's like a variety. And same with Halo 2. There's just a lot of variety. There's Earth, urban area, with like buildings and streets and stuff. But there's also jungle, lush green jungle. There's doomed hellscape type of area that the Arbiter has to fight through. There's High Charity, the Covenant city of High Charity. There were so many different environments. But with Halo Infinite, it's all just forest. And sure, there are some indoor parts, but like that's it. You're either looking at Forerunner style indoor parts or open forest. So it really cuts down on the variety. The other major thing that I didn't like about the sort of open world design is that, with the original Halo games, it was an open world, right? But you felt like you were in like a real world with like unscalable mountains, right? Like the Master Chief isn't just gonna climb a mountain, right? In some of the levels you're in a canyon, you're between two steep cliffs, and so you can't just scale those cliffs, so you have to like make your way through the canyon. But when you're given an open world like in Halo Infinite and a grapple shot, it's like terrain doesn't really matter anymore, right? It might as well be a flat landscape because you can get anywhere, go anywhere. And while that sounds like a good thing, this kind of freedom, I don't think it really is, because again, there's nothing to be discovered in most of this landscape, and the hills and stuff like that, all they do is they serve as a speed bump, sort of, like if you need to go from point A to point B, rather than navigating through a canyon, you just draw a straight line from A to B. Even if there's a hill or mountain in the way, you just go in a straight line because you can climb it. You can climb that mountain. And so, if anything, all the terrain, this hilly terrain, actually they serve as speed bumps. They're more annoyances than anything, because you're like, I just want to get from A to B, and if this were flat, I could just run it or drive straight through. But because there's a mountain here, I have to use my grapple shot and like run and climb and go slowly over this. Like, it becomes more of an annoyance than anything. So anyway, overall, not a fan of the open world aspect. I know that there are some side missions where you can like take down targets, but like, I don't know if those rewards are worth it. Like the reward is to get like some slightly different version of weapons. I don't know. There's not really a story attached to these either. Yeah, overall, I would say the open world is a miss. Now, just a quick word on graphics. I quite like the art style of Halo Infinite. I think it's a bit closer to like Halo 3, enemy design and weapon design and stuff like that. And I think it looks great. I think the Halo 3 elites are some of the best looking elites, in my opinion. I do like how the elites stand in Halo 1. They're a bit more upright and tall, but I like the armor design in Halo 3. So I like the art style. It's definitely way better than Halo 4. That's some ugly ass elites and grunts. Now, as for the story, I think the story is a big miss for me as well. It seems to be fairly mundane and also abstract. Like, I played through the campaign just now, and like, I don't remember that much of it. It's so unmemorable. There's something about the AI being sent to Zeta Halo to trap or delete Cortana. And like, I think that's it. Like, that's the story. Yeah, I can't really remember anything beyond that. Sure, they tease this new creature type. I think it's called the Endless or the Harbinger. But like, there's not actually any story being revealed around the Harbinger. Like, so yeah, I think literally the story in Halo Infinite is the weapon was sent to delete Cortana. That's it. And then anything else, right? All the other things that happen with the Atriox and Cortana, those are all told as hologram flashbacks, which is like the lamest way to tell a story. And what's more, it's not something that you are playing through, right? It's all stuff that have already happened. And so what that means is Halo Infinite just feels extremely mundane. The Master Chief is just running from one terminal to the other, plugging the weapon in and watching holograms. That's it. It's a very boring story. Compare that to say Halo 1. I haven't played Halo 1 in a long time, but like I can still remember parts of it. Like at the beginning, your ship is being boarded by the Covenant, and you're like making a hasty escape. You have to eject on life rafts, and then you happen to land on a halo ring, which what is this thing? We don't know. And you have to kind of figure that out along the way. You find that there are forerunner structures on this halo ring, and you find out that it's actually a type of weapon, but the Covenant don't know that, and they want to activate it, and so you have to like prevent them from doing it. And then somewhere along the line, you discover the Flood, and it turns out that the ring is a weapon against the Flood. And you discover the horrors of the Flood, and so you try and escape that ring and destroy it along with the Flood. That's Halo 1. It's like things happen. There are events that happen. Halo 2 as well. The Covenant arrive on Earth, and you manage to beat them back, and you follow them through a slip portal, and you find another ring. And you also see how this war is from the Arbiter's side. There's like a Covenant rebellion, though admittedly that's like the most boring part of Halo 2, but there's stuff happening. You meet the Gravemind, and so there's a partnership that happens between the Arbiter and Master Chief somewhat. And you have to board High Charity, right? The Covenant city of High Charity, which is a high point to me in the game. And meanwhile, it's starting to get taken over by the Flood, and then you have to once again try and escape that Covenant city. Like things happen, it feels high stakes. You have to try and make it out of there just in the nick of time. Both games end with like a exciting vehicle sequence, but that's not the case with Halo Infinite. There's just nothing happening in the story. I will say the boss fights and stuff like that are fun, right? And they can be frustrating because they are hard, and it ends with a pretty decent boss fight. But that's not story, right? A boss fight is not a story, and so to me, Halo Infinite is a miss there. So anyway, man, I've talked for a long time, but that's my hot take on Halo Infinite. It's I think it's an okay game. Gameplay wise, it's got some golden nuggets there. It's enjoyable enough, but for all the wins, there are misses, like with the open world design. And yeah, I'd say the campaign story is just it's not something that I'm eager to re-experience. Now, none of this includes multiplayer. I'm totally not a multiplayer kind of guy. I shouldn't say that. I actually love the couch multiplayer, local multiplayer on the original Halos, Halo 1 and Halo 2. I am not at all about online multiplayer. And so that's probably not something I will ever experience or check out. So yeah, anyway, that's my sort of review, if you want to call it, on the single player campaign part of Halo Infinite. All right, I'll see you in the next one.